And one of them is that Betsy volunteered or asked if the usual presenter stipend that we give to our presenters could instead be used to give away gift certificates from Derby Canyon natives. And so we said, yes. We said, yes, that's a fantastic idea. And so I'm hoping everyone has a little raffle ticket in their hands. Okay, we've got a few people that don't. Okay, we'll work on that first. Oh, Elisa, yes, has everything already ahead. So Elisa, if she didn't give you a ticket, she went on the guest list and wrote in everyone's name. So we can trust her. All right. Here we go.
Hi, drama. Okay, number one. Jack Minot.
Oh, okay. Here. You want to tell them what it is?
Yeah, sure. What do I get?
This is
Dollar gift card, right?
It's a gift certificate to Derby Canyon natives. Yes, so you can buy a few supplies after you hear the presentation. Yes. Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. Who's next?
Chris. Honus? Honus?
Chris. Eric, congratulations.
Yeah. Chuck Robinson.
Oh, very good.
Oh.
Here you are. Yeah, this is the area right here.
Okay, I'm gonna shake it. Graham? Rockowitz?
Oh, yeah.
You're welcome.
Okay.
I have a bunch more stuff to say. Okay, so thanks very much for that, Betsy. I'm going to read our Chelan-Douglas Land Trust land acknowledgement that was created collaboratively and was approved by the Colville Reservation in their business council. And it's something that we read before many of our events. We feel really strongly about it. The Chelan-Douglas Land Trust works to protect land that lies within the traditional territories of the Piscosa, Chelan, Inuit, Methow, Okanagan, and Moses Columbia people. This region has long been an area for fishing and hunting, gathering of plants, trading, and ceremony for these tribes. We recognize that Native American people have been stewards of this land since time immemorial, and that their people, culture, and traditions live on today. We acknowledge that the U.S. government violated agreements, court findings, and promises by taking land and resources in tribal homelands and the rights to reside upon, to hunt, to fish, and to gather on these lands. CDLT recognizes that these injustices still exist and that as we work to protect these lands in perpetuity, we must remember the history of the land and the people who first lived here and still live here. We, CDLT, and all non-native peoples benefited from such takings, moving on to the land, gaining employment, and raising families on the wealth of what was once tribal territory. CDLT recognizes the advantages of the traditional ecological knowledge of tribal people as applied to holistic land management. We embrace the traditional practices employed and pledge to honor these tribes. We commit to strengthening partnerships that respect tribal history, traditional wisdom of the land, Native American contributions, tribal culture, and strive to build lasting relationships and trust. So that's kind of a good starting place for us when we think about protecting maybe a little bit of land that you have yourself. So just a little bit about the Lunch and Learn series. We started this a few years ago as a way to kind of bring our members, most of you, members and staff and board members all together to learn on some topic that will help inform how the Land Trust does its work. So it's been a really growing popular series, and we're glad you're here today. But just a quick poll: how many of you, by show of hands, are members? So quite a lot. And who is it, like a guest of a member today? Great, excellent. Okay. So as you know, we're going to hear about approachable ways to transition from turf grass to more ecologically beneficial options, like native grasses or even wildflower meadows and that kind of thing. But I would say that many of us at the Land Trust think about conservation in this way with large landscapes, but it also can start right at home. This topic connects directly to the Land Trust mission, caring for land in ways that support habitat, water, and community resilience. And of course, in North Central Washington, we are intimately aware of the challenges that there can be with drought, wildfire risk, and habitat loss. So the way we landscape in our own yards can either contribute to those challenges or help address them. It's also a way to expand our impact by creating habitat corridors and supporting pollinators across the broader community. These are the same kinds of principles that we think about every day as we do restoration work. So this presentation invites us to rethink those spaces as opportunities for habitat and stewardship. It's a chance to connect our conservation values with our everyday actions. And most importantly, it's about possibility. What can happen when we shift even a small piece of land toward healthier, more resilient landscapes? So this is an exciting topic, and I think there's a direct link to what we do in our own little space to what the Land Trust does on a bigger scale. And we are lucky to have our guide today is Betsy Dudash, who is a landscape designer, likes to use native plants in that regard. He's been a leader with Sustainable NCW and teaches at the college. So I'll stop taking all of your time and turn it over to you. So please help me welcome Betsy.
So, can you hear me? Yeah. So some of you have heard me lecture or teach, and I want to say from the get-go, there's no such thing as a stupid question, which is what my Girl Scout leader used to say. And I like to kind of do this interactively, but we'll wait till the end of a section and I'll take questions and I'll hang around afterwards as long as I need to if you have specific questions. And let me also say that I tend to overwhelm with information. I am aware of this character flaw, but I told Angela to please share the PDF with anyone who's interested so you can at home read it and look things up and kind of ponder and not be so overwhelmed. And my goal today is really to inspire you to maybe take the first small step, or maybe you're well on your way into the native plant journey and you need to consider like broader options or kind of bigger options. All right. So, oh, I keep forgetting. They're over there. Up. Okay, because I have to go high to hit that. Okay. So we all know water is a limited resource, and the winter we just had, or the non-winter we just had, is a stark reminder that it is not a limitless resource, and I have opinions on that. But let me ask a quick survey. Who here has irrigation water in their landscape? And out of all of you, who has a lawn? And who probably overwaters that lawn? Fess up. Yeah, okay. So those of us on city water don't do that because it's too expensive. So a lot of this is probably primarily addressed to those of you with irrigation water, and maybe how you can change some of that. As well as the water, which is a limited resource. Mowing a lawn requires fuel and labor. And if you overwater or you over-fertilize, that requires even more of that mowing and the fuel and the labor. And something most people don't think about with the lawn is over-fertilization has kind of a downstream effect, we'll call it, as far as affecting water quality. I had to take a whole class on turfgrass management at Purdue, so I happen to know that anybody who tells you that you need to fertilize your lawn 3 or 4 times a season for optimal lawn health is selling you a bunch of hooey. The actual, if you still want a lawn, or you want to have a remnant of a lawn, the late fall fertilization that's going to feed the roots is the only one you need to think about. So if you have a lawn care service where they're spraying it, I need you to go home and cancel that, like today, okay? You don't need to do that. The other thing about non-native turf grasses, which is what traditional lawns are, they're non-native turf grasses, right? Is that because they haven't co-evolved with native insects, there is no biochemical relationship between those species. And that's what's really important. If you've heard me lecture before, I go on and on about coevolution and the importance of the insects and the birds having that relationship tens of thousands of years, that took tens of thousands of years to develop so that insects can eat certain plants. So let's keep going. Oh, shoot. I wish I were, I'm gonna have to come back up here because I'm not very tall and shrinking. There we go. No, almost. Okay. So other reasons to replace your, I like to walk and talk, so I'm going to do this. Okay. So, so native plants provide food and shelter for insects, birds, and other wildlife. That's obvious, right? Talking about the water again, drought adaptive native plants, including native turf grasses, require far less water. If you think about, say, Eastern United States or the Midwest, they get, 40 plus inches of precipitation a year. How much do we get in Wenatchee? What are the latest figures? 7 to 10, roughly, and on a downward trend. So that's not sustainable to have, that much water going into a lawn. And then the big thing that nobody wants to admit is that you will have to weed. You will have to weed. I have some friends who are like, they listen to my lecture and they're like, you talked about weeding, and then it was like a hard no for them. But I find weeding to be a kind of very Zen thing. And some of you who are friends know that I am not a very Zen person. So this is good that I have kind of an outlet. So you will have to weed, and as your lawn alternative, especially if it's a non-lawn, grows and matures, it will require less weeding, okay? So there's hope at the end of the line, unless you have a winter like we just had in which I saw weeds I haven't seen before. I mean, it was crazy. I'm still working on it, but it's good. And then obviously lawn alternatives are a lot more visually interesting than just green, right? Okay. Oh, I keep forgetting. Oh my God. I should stay up here. I could stay up here. Okay, cool. So planning. Planning is important. Planning is one of the reasons I started teaching continuing education classes, because I wanted to stop people or help you, the consumer, we'll call you the consumer, understand that you can't just impulsively buy plants and stick them in your landscape and expect it all to work out, right? Especially if you go to Lowe's and you find plants that are, half dead and nobody else wanted, and, it's not going to work. So planning is important. Oh, okay, good. So it's important when we're talking about an eco-friendly lawn alternative. So important thing to think about, and the thing that I actually start every landscape plan with, is if you take away the lawn, how are you going to move through the landscape? Because if you just have a pretty landscape, but you can't actually get out and enjoy it and say hi to your plants and, pet the bees or whatever you want to do. So it's really important to plan ahead. And I find that paths through a landscape are really important. It really actually will change your relationship with your plants and with your outdoor space. So that's really important. So if you get rid of it all, that has to change. That relationship has to change. And one way to do that is with gravel paths, which are great, and they're also a fire break. So if there's, if you live in the wildland urban interface and there's brush fires, having gravel paths is like physical barrier to a brush fire. So that's one thing. Also, if you already have a lot of lawn space,
I just lost it. Just to mute my mic.
okay, can you hear me? Okay. So one thing to think about if you have a lot of lawn and you're going to begin the transition is that you can turn part of that lawn into a mowed path. So everything should be gradual. Okay. Pavers are expensive. Stepstones with flagstone are very easy and adjustable. Okay. I'm embarrassingly short today, so, okay. So first alternative, and your source for this would be Derby Canyon Natives. Currently carries like 4 different seed blends. And the most popular in talking to Mel, and I've had clients use it, is a naturalized turf blend, which is like 4 different fescues and I think sand drop seed and prairie June grass. So the fescues, if you know, fescues are very fine textured grasses, and these are all natives, so they're all drought tolerant. And the other thing to think about is just because you have a lawn, unless you're using that lawn for play or for entertaining at any given time, you don't necessarily have to mow it. So with a native lawn, having it flower and go to seed, what is that doing? That's feeding insects, it's feeding birds, it's feeding the little tiny mammals that run around in your yard. So a way to have a native lawn and to still have a lawn is to only mow it like right before you have a graduation party or something, or a big barbecue or something. So that's something to think about. And Mel and I talk about stuff a lot because we're in the same opposite ends of the same business, right? I'm a horticulturist and she's the grower. She's going to start carrying more seeds this fall. She doesn't carry a lot. She currently carries, grass seeds, but she's going to start carrying some more because there's growing interest. And then the point at the bottom that I can't overstate is that no matter what you plant, if you plant a blend of whether it's a blend of grasses or, as we'll look at, perennials and grasses and annuals, whatever plants are most well adapted to your site are the ones that will dominate over time. And some of you know that my yard is a haven for snow buckwheat. I've literally had to pull out giant piles of it because sandy soil, heat, it just has all the things. So wherever you live, whatever kind of soil, whatever conditions you have, you can start by, putting together what you think will work and then let nature take over. Okay. Oh, it worked. Okay. So there's, I got a shout out to Northwest Meadowscapes, which is a really fun website to go down a plant rabbit hole, especially if you're a horticulturist. They have so many ideas that I have taken freely from them and actually used some of these ideas with clients and teaching. So an eco lawn is when you actually have low growing grasses, the non-aggressive grasses, and then you plant them with low growing clovers, for instance. There's other plants, but clovers are a good way to do it because a lot of people say, well, we used to all have clover in our yards. But the clovers that like you could buy at the farm and feed or whatever they're called, most of those are not the native clovers. Those are like, agricultural clover, right? But these three species, two of which are annuals, are clovers that you could mix in with low growing grasses. And that creates, a kind of fun. I mean, look at this one, a short perennial with 3 to 4 inch flowers that large-headed clover, can you imagine 3 to 4 inch flowers? Kind of cool. So one of my goals, I think I told you, is to inspire you to start experimenting, trying different things. And before I continue, I want to say that it's possible to do that experimentation on a small scale. I mean, I have planters that are filled with nothing but native plants. And they reseed and they come back every year, and every year they're a little bit different. Or you could decide, say, hey, I'm going to take just the edge of my current lawn. I'm going to take, 3 feet of the current lawn on the perimeter and try something. Because growing plants is not like, it's more like cooking than anything else, right? You put all the ingredients together, and unless you're super skilled, you might not expect what turns up, right? You might be like, oh, well, that's interesting. I shouldn't have put that in there, right? But you're not going to hurt anything, right? The worst thing that's going to happen if you start growing a few native plants is you'll bring in some bees and some butterflies and some moths, and those little creatures will, their larvae will reproduce on your plants, and then there'll be more, and they'll be able to feed the birds, and you'll begin that little cycle. Okay, that's the worst thing that can happen. Although the second thing that will happen especially if you use native annuals, like I love to experiment with, some of them are prolific reseeders. So in the spring, you'll be like, wow, like I currently have large clumps of lace leaf phacelia, lacy phacelia, which I seeded a year and a half ago. Just starting to bloom, beautiful in annual. And I don't have to worry about it, but I know what it is. And I know what my Rocky Mountain penstemon looks like, so I can pull that, So they're not weeds in the sense that, oh, I don't know where this came from and it's harmful. They are familiar friends in the form of seedlings that may have been too eager to reproduce in your yard, but you know what they are and you can take care of them, right? So those are some options. Here we go. So more eco lawn options. So the grass portion of this is really interesting because traditional turf grasses, like I said, they require a lot of water, they require full sun, and they require certain growing conditions, and they can be quite vigorous, and they will outcompete anything else. These are 3 interesting options. And the second one, the poverty oak grass, has actually been studied by Cornell University, and they're like, yeah, this plant shows huge promise as in eco lawns, where it's a mix with perennials and annuals. 3-week fescue is a quick growing fescue. So if you have bare areas that need to be filled in, that'll do it. The poverty oak grass, poor soil, part shade, great caterpillar host plant. All of these are caterpillar host plants, and who knows why caterpillar host plants are so important? I kind of alluded to it. Anybody know? Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yeah, they're super important. Baby birds need them, and those the caterpillars can only feed
Oh,
on
so
certain
this is what you're
species. Like I
thinking?
mentioned, that biochemical relationship. If they don't have that biochemical relationship, they can't feed on them. They can't reproduce on those plants. So it's really important. The path rush. So normally I think of rushes and I think, oh, like a wetland or a wetter area. That's not necessarily true. This one, I have packs of all these in my fridge because I compulsively buy seeds because I'm going to try them.
We'll just
Didn't
your
get to this
phone and
last
pick
winter, but again, tufty little plant tolerant of trampling and mowing and can be interplanted with low growing perennials or wildflowers. So this is my one of my big points is that you can think about stuff that you never considered before, right? And you can try new things. You can, designate little test areas in your yard if you have a big yard and see what happens. Okay, and this picture is not mine. I stole this picture from northwestmeadowscapes.com, but it's kind of everybody's
I don't
kind of
think I got
classic
it.
view of wildflower meadow.
Isn't that funny?
Fact is that because we live in a
This is
desert,
the part I wanted, though.
our
Yeah.
version of a wildflower meadow will be very different, and we'll look at that in the next few slides.
Love that.
But there's some
Blues
kind of,
in there.
I'm not going to
Well,
say
hang
they're
on,
ground
this is-
rules, but there's some guidelines
Oh.
here. First of all, it's going to be really important to include annuals, perennials, and bunch grasses. Now, why wouldn't you just include perennials and bunch grasses? Why do annuals become so important in this equation? Rich? You got it. Yeah. Yeah. So annuals, they fill in the bare space because perennials and bunch grasses, especially in a low water environment, are going to be slow to establish. The other reason is because those of you who hang out in the foothills, and I know a lot of you do, you know that our native species tend to go dormant in the heat of summer. But one of the goals in creating habitat for pollinators and birds and everybody is that you want to try to provide plants that bloom all season long. So when we're talking about a super, like my yard, for instance, sandy soil, I mean, it's like sand. It's like living on a beach, hot sun, very intense, tough conditions. But by using some annuals, I have blooms midsummer into August into October that nobody else has. So it's going to be really important to include those. So again, the whole point is to have something in bloom from spring into, I'm going to say fall because most years I have plants blooming into the end of October because of our crazy weather. And then what you choose, and I'm going to give you some options in the next one. But if you're like, okay, everything's yellow because like most of our native wildflowers are yellow, right? There's a few other colors, but you could choose a color palette. You could be like, okay, I want these colors, or you can be like, I'm just going to use everything and see what works, right? Super important, the perennials and the summer blooming annuals should be adapted to your site, meaning they should be drought adapted. If your goal is a low water native landscape, those perennials and bunch grasses need to be able to withstand those conditions. But your spring annuals can be, kind of Oregon coast or whatever, something, because they'll get the moisture they need. They'll bloom early. I mentioned I have Lacey Phacelia blooming. The Lacey Phacelia will die back some point this summer, but it'll drop seed and it'll come up again. Also Globegilia, which is a plant we'll look at too, which is cute, the cutest little, blue flower heads you've ever seen. Prolific spring bloomer. It just shrivels up in my yard in the heat of summer, but it's done its thing, right? So you can have a lot of spring bloom and then you have some other species that'll take over. Okay. Yeah, I already mentioned this. Some of the annuals can be wildly competitive. Yeah. And the grasses should be tall enough so they don't get overwhelmed, because your goal is to create kind of a long-term habitat. Unless you want one that obscures your neighbors completely, then I have some options for that too. But because you can hide behind your plants. Okay, so like I said, choose as many as you want. Again, I mentioned this earlier. I can't stress this point enough. Over time, the species will change. Other species will outcompete, some species will outcompete others, especially as perennials get established. And there are some annuals, based on my personal experience, that do great first year, seed a little bit the second year, and then nothing. But then others vigorously reseed every year. So you think about that. I would plan on seeding almost everything because depending on the size of the area, but also because you won't necessarily be able to find like annual plants. Mel grew some year before last. They didn't sell well, so she's not growing them again. But you can get seeds and you can do it yourself. And then those of you who know, like balsam root and the lupins should generally be seeded. That's what they do, right? That's just, you're mimicking their native habitat and how they reproduce and grow and eventually, after 5 years or whatever, bloom in the wild. So definitely seed annuals. Oh, and some species require patience, and I'm thinking of balsam root, Indian rice grass, which is like it's got a really tough, anything with a really tough seed. I'm not going to go into the horticulture of it all, but all of them, almost all of them require what's called cold moist stratification, which means they sit under the snow in cold temperatures for a certain amount of time. And that amount of time, whether it's 30 or 60 or 90 or longer days, varies by species. So like this past winter, there was no snow, so nobody that didn't happen, which is why like the Lacey Phacelia was fine with it because it's used to, rain, winter rain, but not winter snow, but it can affect a lot of other species. Okay. Oh, it worked. Okay, good. Wow, I'm getting better. Okay, so annuals, yeah. So here's a possible list of ideas. And you'll see the annuals. So our native lupins in the foothills are the silky and the sulfur. The big ones that you see at Derby Canyon, those are a wetland species. Don't use those in your dryland landscape. You'll be very disappointed. Line leaf daisy, which is the little mound. You'll see pictures of it. Threadleaf fleabane, I love. I love all fleabanes. Bare stem biscuit root. There's tons of biscuit roots. I actually have seeds for Columbia biscuit root in my fridge. I'm going to try that. Creamy buckwheat. Mine is now blooming, which is great. And snow buckwheat. And I mentioned snow buckwheat. If you have conditions that snow buckwheat likes, which is very well-drained soil and full sun, you'll have thousands of babies every spring, except this year, where I don't have a single one because of the lack of snow cover. So I'm going to put this thought in your heads too. The lack of snow cover isn't just affecting water, how much water we have. It is affecting how plants are able to reproduce, germinate and reproduce and spread. So it's a problem, right? Bunch grasses, Indian rice grass, bottlebrush squirreltail, which I think is the cutest grass ever. It's adorable. Blue bunch wheatgrass, which we all know, it's just everywhere. And then annuals, globegilia, the threadleaf and Lacey Phacelia. The Clarkias are hot pink, and you'll see pictures. Large flowered colomia, which tolerates some shade, which is great. Clover, I mentioned. Yellow bee plant is, I planted yellow bee plant 3 years ago in my front yard, and it continues to produce. And it starts, and it's not big. It's like this tall. It's pretty yellow flowers like all season long. And hoary tansy aster, which is locally native and is probably one of the toughest plants you can find. And we're going to look at some after we look at the next one. So that's for very dry sites, right? Okay, so, and this is all relative, right? Whether a site is very dry or moderately dry, will also depend on your soil type, which I'm not going to talk about except to say I have sand, so by definition, very dry. If you have clay or a moderate amount of clay or a lot of clay, clay holds moisture. So you probably have a moderately, dry site. Although in our 90s and hundreds in, July and August into September, that all becomes variable. So everybody's yard or landscape or whatever is going to be different. The microclimates are going to be different. Where in your yard, you're talking about how much shade or sun and other factors. Okay. So, so you're going to see a bunch of overlap. I did include in this one the sulfur buckwheat, silverleaf phacelia, which is all over the Leavenworth area, and I never see it here. It's at higher elevations. Spreading dogbane, I can't grow it, but I know the people who can because they have clay, because my soil is just too dry. Narrowleaf milkweed, which I did grow until it got caught up in the whole snow buckwheat revolution. Blanket flower in my yard is a very short-lived perennial. It reseeds. It's one of the few that actually can reseed and germinate in warm conditions. So I'll have babies and I'll move it. Other people have blanket flower. Their plants last forever and they form, big groups. And Canada goldenrod, which is incredibly important species. And the thing about our Western goldenrod is that it starts blooming early, like May, and will go all the way into the fall. And as a native Midwesterner, Eastern goldenrods bloom late August, late summer into fall. So the fact that we have one that just goes and goes is great. And if you look at what people tell you the actual height will be, they'll say like up to 4 feet. Okay, that's in a wetland. That's in like sitting in water. In my very dry yard in Wenatchee, mine's about this tall. So that's the thing to remember about all these plants. How tall they grow, how quickly they grow, how much they spread will depend on water. Water is the limiting factor. Remember that. Water is the limiting factor, especially in a desert, okay? I added pine grass, which I love, and prairie June grass. Let's see. Clarkias again. Basically the same. Plains coreopsis. If you grow that, know that you're going to have plants everywhere. Everywhere. But they're easy to give away or dig up and transplant into the landscape, and they're very, very tough. So let's look at some pictures. Did anybody have any questions before we look at plants? Go ahead. So, okay, that's a great question because, yeah. Oh, he said, can I point out plants that are firewise? And that's an excellent question. So pretty much any plant that is fleshy, almost every perennial and annuals that they have a lot of water in them during their growing season. So they are therefore by definition firewise. Okay. The bunch grasses gets trickier, but if you give them just a little bit of water as maybe weekly or biweekly, just enough to prevent them from going dormant, because in the foothills, things go dormant, right? Then they're hot, dry tinder. But in your home landscape, you can add a little bit of water and you can prevent that from happening. So pretty much any of these I would consider firewise. All right. The native grass different. Native insects do not care about non-native plants. So no, the pests that are on ornamentals and non-native plants are specific to those. No, native insects are not pests by any, they're just not. They're helpful. Yeah. we're going to talk about that. That's a great question. If you have an established lawn, how do you get rid of it? And that's actually the easiest thing. Okay, we'll continue. We're going to look at some, I mentioned some of these plants. That's actually my backyard a couple summers ago, by the way. This is why Rocky Mountain bee plant, the purple one, incredible habitat plant, right? But it's my height without water and with water, like when you go on vacation for 2 weeks and your neighbor waters and you come back and it's 8 feet tall. Yeah. No, not at all. No, it's actually used to be classified as a cleome. Terrific plant, but the yellow bee plant is like a diminutive version of that that's very friendly in the landscape. This is a crazy plant, but I love it. Okay, so I'm just going to quickly show you pictures in case you're like, what is she talking about? What is that plant? These are both really important species. And just FYI, in my own landscape, my yarrow came from plants I bought clearance at Fred Meyer in July of 2018, right after we had moved here. And they're the colored ones. And they, in my landscape at least, they function the same as the white one. They produce insects. I mean, there's reproduction of insects. There's just a lot going on. And yarrow are very vigorous. They are very vigorous spreaders. It's a great plant, great plant. This one of the lupins, hairy golden aster, is my opinion is wildly underused. It's native to Leavenworth. It's in Icicle Road and the fish hatchery, and there's a neat little mound with yellow flowers that start blooming in May and bloom into October. And I lost one this winter, but the other two are alive, so I'm excited. I love it. I absolutely love it. That's the threadleaf fleabane on the left, which is I'm really partial to. It's a little tiny purple flowers. And the line leaf daisy is the little mound you see in April. It's probably blooming right now, right? Yeah. In the foothills, yeah. There's that's my front yard on the left. A little bit of snow buckwheat for you. Creamy buckwheat and the sulfur buckwheat. Buckwheats in general are extraordinarily drought tolerant. And Mel has a good collection of them. And also there's some that she doesn't carry, but I know that people at higher elevations have like tall buckwheat show up. There's several varieties, several species, I mean. So the narrowleaf milkweed is like a ground cover. It's a very well-behaved milkweed. And silverleaf phacelia. I grow the annual phacelias because I can't grow those. I mean, I can't grow the perennial. So that's the other thing. If there's an annual version of something like phacelias, you can grow that no matter how bad conditions get, right? Can try them anyway. Indian ricegrass, bottlebrush squirreltail. It's not the best pictures, but see it in person and you'll be like, oh, I love that. It's very cute. Diminutive. Blue bunch wheatgrass, pine grass, Idaho fescue, prairie June grass. This is one of my planters. The yellow is the yellow bee plant, and that's the yellow bee plant on the right. And the really pretty little purple daisy there is hoary tansy aster. They're very small. They bloom really late. So it's a late summer, fall bloomer. And if you look around you, you'll notice that that particular time of the year is one where we're like, okay, what's happening here? So sunflowers, those plants are great. I'm going to get to the globegilia. That's the one I told you about with the little blue flowers. That's my house again. That's one of the ways that the Plains coreopsis expresses itself. It also comes in yellow or yellow and red, but then they will revert to whatever. So the Clarkias are absolutely gorgeous. Clovers, large flowered colomia, which tolerates dry shade, which is like the most interesting thing about it, I think. Okay, implementation, and that's my front yard at some stage. So we had a question about killing your lawn. Because we live in a desert, It's really easy. First thing I want you to do if you decide to embark on part of this, either whole hog or on a smaller scale, is contact the Chelan County Noxious Weed Board and have them come out and identify any noxious weeds in your landscape and have them help you figure out a way to deal with them. This is really important. If you're like, I don't have any weeds, well, you're lucky. But most people do, and they're usually surprised at how that those plants are like illegal to grow or whatever. So that's step one. And the goal is to have a completely dead lawn by the time you're ready to seed. And seeding time will be before it snows. So I'm talking late October into November. So the easiest thing is, first of all, scalp your lawn. Who knows what that means? You just cut it as short as you can, like with a string trimmer or a mower. You just want to expose the roots, right? You can cut it down. There's these roots, and they're not going to survive without, the plants, right? The actual leaves. Then you stop irrigating. You shut off your irrigation, right? And I'm talking July, August, right? When we have those temperatures, you'll be surprised how quickly your lawn shrivels up and dies and then just turns into, I think the technical term is duff. Is that right? I think that's right. Yeah. You knew that. Right? Yeah. So then you leave that dead lawn in place until you're ready to plant. And you may get, if you live in an HOA, which I'm sorry if you do, you may get some blowback, but you could explain that you are in the process of converting an area or a large lawn to native plants. And what's interesting is a lot of legislation keeps getting passed around the country, protecting people's rights to grow native plants instead of turf grass lawns. So it's really exciting to see movement like that. So it's actually super easy to get rid of your lawn. All right. And especially if you've been overwatering it all, spring into early summer, and then all of a sudden you cut them off, because by overwatering, you are actually preventing those turfgrass plants from growing decent roots. Like on their own with minimal watering, they'll get a decent root system, right? The people that we see watering in the middle of the day, 3 times a day or whatever, those roots are probably, I would have to guess, like 1/2 inch to 1 inch, and they are not going to survive the heat without that. It's just not going to happen. So it's really easy. And then planting the seeds. So this is really easy. I already mentioned timing, and Angela has my permission to share this PDF with anyone who wants it. So let her know. But then you're just going to rake the grass. You're going to scatter your seeds, and there's notes about bulking them up, but you're going to scatter the seeds. And depending on the size of the area, you can just walk around, because the important thing is it's called seed to soil contact. You don't want your seeds sitting on a pocket of air, basically. You want them like in contact with the soil. And then you're just going to hope we get snow. If we don't get snow, like this past winter, and actually the past 2 winters in Wenatchee, you might have to pull out your hoses, which at a certain point becomes untenable because your outdoor spigots might freeze. But I would say try to water. One of the rules of watering with new plants is always water until the ground freezes. So if you're able to do that, you can try. Otherwise, I'll just say that seeds are cheap compared to plants. And if we don't get snow, you may have lost that investment. Some of those seeds might surprise you the next year, a year later. The birds may eat some of them. The ones that don't require that cold moist stratification will germinate. Like I said, like the Lacey Phacelia and the Globegilia and the Plains Coreopsis. You will have something depending on what mix of plants you include, okay? But as our climate gets weirder and weirder, we can't predict what's going to happen. So I'm just going to put that out there. And that's part of the whole process. Yeah.
mineral soil, so if you have a lot of. Many lawns do, I see.
I would, yes. So, yes, exactly. So if you have a lot of thatch, which a lot of people who have lawns that have been there a long time do, then you're gonna use, you're gonna rake that away, or you can dethatch or whatever it takes. Yeah. Yeah, that's excellent. And in the spring, so let's assuming some of your plants germinate. You're gonna wait to water until soil starts to dry out, okay? Because the goal of this we have two goals in this whole process, right? Number one is to what? Reduce water. Number two, that's right, biodiversity, create habitat. So you don't want to overwater. I like to explain watering with a bell curve. So early in the spring, when normally we've had like winter rains or snow, there's still quite a bit of soil moisture. As plants are growing, they're fine. And then all of a sudden it starts to get hot and they're not so fine. And when I already talked about the annuals, some of these annuals will live through anything, right? Specifically, you're going to think about your native perennials and bunch grasses and think, okay, what do they need once it starts to heat up and the soil starts to dry? So you're going to water as needed. And this is an important step that people don't like to do, especially if they have irrigation systems. After you water, I want you to dig into the soil and see how deep the water actually went, because you want it to go fairly deep, because plants grow new root cells every single day except when they're dormant in the wintertime. So if the water goes deeper into the soil profile, those roots will follow. This is why when you do start watering, you're going to be like, okay, I'm going to water once a week, maybe every 2 weeks. You're just going to look at the weather. I obsessively look at the weather because I'm a horticulturist and I have to go out on job sites. But you can't just turn an irrigation system on and forget it, because then you're only accomplishing one of our goals, right? Which is creating habitat. You're doing nothing to address the overwatering issue, okay? But so that bell curve. So by the peak of the heat in the summer is when you're going to be watering the most. And when I say the most, and you're talking about frequency and or timing, like if you have an irrigation system, you will adjust the time. But then, as soon as the nights start to cool, which should be early August, but hasn't been, you're going to start knocking it back in the same way. So by the time fall is here, your plants are already adapted to less and less water that they don't need. So that's the critical thing to remember, okay? Okay, got a couple more things I can show you. So watering, I just talked about it. I can't stress this point enough. If you have an irrigation system and you're planning on changing all or part of your lawn, you need to make those changes to the irrigation system before you plant anything. They're not here, but I'm thinking of Bob and Sherry, because they did not do that. And then they scrambled to kind of retrofit. Let's talk about cleanup, because you shouldn't, okay? The only maintenance you should be doing in a native landscape, honestly, is weeding. That's literally all you do. All the sticks and the little bits and bobs and that's there. I don't know how many times I've seen birds flying around picking up twigs and everything. Insects live under that. And if you clean your landscape up in the fall, you're literally throwing away the next generation of insects. And if you clean it up too early in the spring, meaning like right about now is kind of finally a good time, it's actually warm all the time, then you're throwing away more insects. And there's a reason the term the insect apocalypse exists. It's very real. And the cascading effect is, as Mary mentioned, birds rely on those caterpillars and everything. So, boom. And now, okay. This has some seeding plants. Northwest Meadowscapes, I had a client who said, yeah, I called them or a student, see, I called them and they said they don't grow anything for Eastern Washington. And I'm like, well, that's not true at all. Just look on the website. They actually have a whole section of Eastern Washington plants. And if you look at the annuals that I mentioned, like I said, spring blooming annuals can be from somewhere that's not a desert and they will just die back in the summertime and then your summer annuals will take over. So the other thing I want to reiterate is that don't be scared to try. Even if you just take a couple of pots, right? Just try it. Or like I said, take part of your lawn or take out a couple of non-native shrubs or wherever you want to start. I think the most important step is to start and kind of get over that fear. Okay? Any more questions? Okay. Were there questions on, Sue, you had a question?
The bees seem to really love my dandelions, and I can just continue to.
So, you see people online all the time saying, leave the dandelions. Dandelions are non-native. So I'm guessing that those are probably honeybees. Honeybees are Europeans. They are not native bees. So the way to think about this is that anytime you have a non-native plant instead of a native plant, you're talking about displacing those native species. The number and the square footage or whatever of native species is reduced. So in my opinion, no, it's a weed that escaped cultivation in the 1700s. Mary? Yes.
They grow with no water.
Yes, mine do too. Those are actually considered kind of native. That's a reseeding native annual. Yeah, those are perfect. And you get tons of goldfinches with them. Yeah. Oh, where can you purchase seeds? Like I said, Mel at Derby Canyon Natives is going to start carrying seeds in the fall or in late summer, fall. And, but Northwest Meadowscapes for small quantities. If you have a large property, then BFI Native Seeds in Moses Lake, which is where Mel used to live. You can actually artificially start your seeds inside. You can put them in moist soil, some sort of soil mix, vermiculite or whatever, and put them in your refrigerator or in a cold spot. Like we have a sleeping porch on our house, and in the wintertime it gets really cold. So that'd be a good place to do it. But you still would then have to, that would break dormancy, and then you can scatter the seeds after they break dormancy or pot them up. Yeah, I think for most people, it's just easier to plant the seeds outside and see what happens based on the weather. Anybody else? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Battling invasive weeds.
Mm-hmm.
Now the orchard grass is coming back really strong.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems to be out competing with the.
So it will be. So there will be, if you have vigorous grasses, you'll have to pull them out or weed whip or somehow minimize their impact. And then when you do that, the trick is to remember that nature abhors a vacuum. So if you remove certain plants, it just creates room for more weeds to germinate. Because remember, our soil is like infested with weed seeds. It's like crazy how many weed seeds are in there. So all they need is water and sunshine, and then those grasses will be replaced by their weeds, by weeds. So what I would probably do is use a string trimmer and cut them back repeatedly through the growing season. But it's going to require work. And you can also, like I said, if you live in Chelan County, contact the weed board, because they will be super helpful in helping you come up with a plan. I personally do not use insecticides or pesticides. They often include those in their recommendations if, and it's because sometimes people might feel like they have to use them. Yeah, I would absolutely do that. If you can dig them out and put something else in there right away, that's better, that competition. So don't do it in the heat of summer because yeah, you can't, right? Any other questions? One more question? Oh, we're done. One more? Okay.
Several strips, and just let it grow.
Mhm. Mm-hmm.
And it's fabulous. I had a lot of, vetch, alfalfa, yarrow, probably from previous
Right.
farm, because it used to be.
Right. So the first two are